Hello YouTube, welcome to another Season 6 Patch 5.24 guide by eGaming Television. In this episode we are bringing you Hecarim, top lane. Now Hecarim did get nerfed a bit in patch 5.24, but he is still a solid top lane pick. He's kind of tier 2 right now. He was borderline god tier before, but with the few nerfs I'm about to talk about, he did get knocked down a few pegs. So the first nerf was his base health was reduced from 599 to 580. On top of this, his health growth stat also changed from 95 to 90, which means every level he only gains 90 health as opposed to 95. Now with both of these health nerfs, his tankiness, at least early game, did go down a fair bit, but he is still pretty solid in lane as he doesn't really have too many top lane counters. Now they also removed his ignore unit collision from his Warpath passive, which is pretty annoying. They did add it, however, to his devastating charge, which is his E, although that does only last for 4 seconds, so now he's got to deal with minions again. Now, although he did get 3 little nerfs, he is still a very strong top laner, like I said before, so don't be turned away from using Hecarim. He can still carry games very hard, as you're going to see in the gameplay portion of this video. So like always, we're going to cover Hecarim's pros and cons, his masteries, runes, summoners, abilities, his ability leveling order, item build, and a few Hecarim tips as well. So now let's talk about Hecarim's pros and cons, starting with his pros. His first is that he's very mobile. He has a built-in ghost, kind of, with his E, as well as a long-range flash from his R, although obviously you don't want to waste your ultimate whenever, but you can use it to escape if needed. This means as Hecarim you don't have to take Ghost or Flash in your summoner build, and in this guide we do not. However, of course you can take those still if you would like to, but it is not a must-have. Another pro for Hecarim is that he has a very strong early and mid game. With the way his Q works, you can spam it very often, and when you get a Trinity Force, it does an absurd amount of damage when you can Q, auto attack, and so on to get off tons of damage. With the way his Q works as well, the more you use it, the faster the cooldown becomes, and you can spam it over and over again, as long as your mana allows you to. Another thing that is kind of a pro, but is also a con, is that he has a decent late game. He does not have an amazing late game, however, most champions that have a very strong early and mid game fall off really hard late game. However, Hecarim does not. He does fall off a bit, but he is still very influential in the game late game. Hecarim's fourth pro is that he doesn't really have many top lane counters. It's rather safe to pick Hecarim early on because you don't really care what the enemy picks. Hecarim's also great to learn because he also counters a ton of top laners. It's a great idea to have Hecarim in your champion pool in case you run into one of the champions that he does counter. So one of his cons, like I kind of mentioned before, is that he falls off a bit late game. He doesn't fall off huge like say a Lee Sin, but he does come a little worse as the game does progress. Hecarim's only other con is that he has very little CC in his kit. He has a small knockback and a little kind of fear from his ultimate, but that's all. Everything else is just damage / regenerating health based, so if you're looking for a champion that can do a lot of CCing, Hecarim is not the right one for you. Now we jump into Hecarim's masteries, which are 18 Cunning and 12 Resolve. In Cunning we get Wanderer for 3% movement speed out of combat, followed by Assassin, which is a new ability that increases damage by 1.5% when no allied champions are near. We follow that up with Merciless, which is 5% more damage to champions below 40% health. Then we move into Dangerous Game, which champion kills and assists restore 5% of missing health and mana, followed by Precision, which is 5 plus 0.5 per level Armor Pen, and 3 plus 0.3 per level Magic Pen. And finally, Thunderlord's Decree, which every third attack or spell on a champion calls down a lightning strike, which deals some damage based on your attack damage and ability power. We then move into Resolve, getting Recovery, which is 2 health regen per 5 seconds, followed by Tough Skin, which makes you take 2 less damage from champion and neutral monster basic attacks, followed by Veteran Scars, which is 45 health, and finally Insight, which reduces cooldown of summoner spells by 15%. Next we move into Hecarim's runes, which are 9 greater marks of armor penetration, 9 greater glyphs of magic resist, 9 greater seals of armor, and 3 greater quintessences of movement speed. Now the greater quintessences of movement speed give you 4.5% extra movement speed, and they're great for Hecarim because you're able to roam quicker, you can escape quicker if you're getting ganked by a jungler, And on top of it, because of your passive, it even increases your damage output. Now we jump into Hecarim Summoners, which are Teleport and Ignite. And like I said before, Hecarim is one of the very few champions that don't need either Ghost or Flash. You can, however, take one if you need it. They are still very solid choices, but they are not mandatory. In this guide, we're going for a high amount of attack damage early on, which is why we do take the Ignite for very high kill potential in the top lane. So as a top laner, Teleport is pretty much standard since you are able to split push all game and still able to join your team for fights and objectives. And Ignite, since Hecarim has such great mobility in his kit, this is one of the very few times we don't need to take an escape summoner. Since we don't need one, we take Ignite, like I said, for some added kill potential. Now we jump into Hecarim's abilities, starting with Warpath, which is his passive. And like I said in the very beginning of the guide, this did get a small nerf where they removed the ignore unit collision on it. So Hecarim gains attack damage equal to 15, 17.5, 20, 22.5, 25, 27.5, or 30% of its movement speed. The percentage is increased at level 3 and every 3 levels thereon. And because of this passive, items such as Trinity Force, which work also very well with his Q, are even better because it does also give him movement speed, so you gain even extra attack damage on top of the Trinity Force. And of course, any other movement speed giving items are also very good. Now, since it's very beneficial to get movement speed items on Hecarim because of this passive, it also makes him a very, very great roamer. Now we look at Hecarim's Q, which is Rampage and is his main bread and butter ability. Hecarim cleaves nearby enemies for between 60 and 200, plus 0.6 bonus attack damage, physical damage, and 66% damage to minions. If Hecarim damages at least one enemy with this attack, he gains a stack of Rampage, reducing the base cooldown of this skill by 1 second for a short duration. Its effect can stack up to 2 times. So the mana cost is between 32 and 40 based on the rank. The cooldown is 4 seconds, although it can be reduced with the stack, and the range is 350. Like previously mentioned, since this does have a very short cooldown, with a Trinity Force it can output a ton of damage, since you can Q attack, and do a ton of damage that way. Now because this is a very good spammable attack and it does work with your early items very well, that's why we max this first. Now we move on to Spirit of Dread, which is Hecarim's W. Hecarim deals between 80 and 240 plus 80% ability power, magic damage over 4 seconds to all nearby enemies. Hecarim is healed for 20% of the damage these enemies take from any source. Hecarim cannot heal more than 90 to 210 health from minions or monsters. So the mana cost is between 50 and 90, the cooldown is between 22 and 18, it does go down with rank, and the range is 525. This is a really strong ability, however it does scale off of your ability power, and the healing does stay at 20% from any source, meaning it's not just from this skill, it's also from your Q and anything else, so you do not need to max this second. People do. However, your E does scale off of your attack damage, and if you're looking to delete single targets, it is much more effective to max your E before your W. Now we look at Hecarim's E, which is called Devastating Charge. Hecarim gains movement speed and can move through units for 4 seconds. Now this was changed in 5.24. This used to be part of your passive, but now they put it on your E. His next attack knocks the target back, dealing between 40 and 180, plus 0.5 per bonus attack damage to 80 to 360, plus 1 per bonus attack damage, physical damage based on how far Hecarim has traveled during Devastating Charge. So the cost is always 60 mana, the cooldown goes down from 24 to 16 based on rank, and the range is yourself as it is a self buff. In this build, this is what we max after our Q, as it is based off of your attack damage and is best for deleting single targets. Last is Hecarim's ultimate, which is called Onslaught of Shadows. Hecarim summons Spectral Riders and charges forward, dealing between 150 to 350 plus 100% of ability power, magic damage to anyone they strike. Hecarim releases a shockwave when he finishes his charge, causing nearby enemies to flee from Hecarim for 1 second. Hecarim himself will only move to the targeted location. The riders will always move the full distance. Now this is obviously great for engaging, as you can close gaps on people. However, you can also use it as a flash and create gaps from people as well. The cost is always 100 mana, the cooldown goes from 140 to 120 to 100 seconds based on the rank, and the range is 1000. This skill isn't great for the damage it does, as it's based off of your ability power, and obviously you're not going for an ability power build, but it is great, like I said, for either creating a gap or closing a gap, and the short CC it does provide as well. With all of his abilities covered, we're now going to look at his ability leveling order. First is Onslaught of Shadows, which is his ultimate, and like always, you take it whenever you can, meaning level 6, 11, and 16. You follow this up with Rampage, which is your Q. You take it at level 1 and is your main leveling priority. So you take it at 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Next in priority is Devastating Charge, which is your E. You take this at level 4 and it is your second in leveling priority. So you take it at 4, 8, 10, 12, and 13. Finally, Spirit of the Dread, which is your W, is taken at level 2 and it is last in leveling priority. So you take it at 2, 14, 15, 17, and 18. So now we're going to look at Hecarim's item build, which is a bit different than usual. Most champions get a Doran's item first. However, as Hecarim, we first get Corrupting Potion, which has 3 charges that refill when visiting the shop that give 150 health and 50 mana over 12 seconds, which also can grant Touch of Corruption when activated. And Touch of Corruption spells and attacks burn enemy champions for between 15 and 30 magic damage over 30 seconds, and the damage increases with champion level. Now this item is great for the sustain you get with the health and the mana, as well as the magic damage burn you get over 3 seconds, which can help bully enemy champions in lane. Since you do find yourself spamming Q in short engages with the enemy champion, the 50 mana over 12 seconds actually helps a lot as well. The first item we rush is Boots of Swiftness, as it increases your mobility, of course, as well as increasing some damage from your passive. We then get a Ghost Blade because it has a lot of armor pen on the passive, and it is great for the active as well, as it gives you a bunch of attack damage and movement speed as well. Next, we get a Trinity Force because it's very good with your Q, as you can spam it and get the active from your Trinity Force rather fast. As well, you get some movement speed, so you also get increased attack damage from that from your passive as well. Now that we've got a bunch of damage, we then move into a tanky sort of build. We get a Dead Man's Plate for the armor and a Spirit Visage for the magic resist, and then we also get Asterix Gauge. You get a bunch of health from this item as well. When you take between 400 and 1800 damage within 5 seconds, you grow in size and strength, gaining plus 25% additional base attack damage and a decaying shield for 30% max health. Now this is great because obviously you can't be bursted, since you do get a very high max health shield, and you do get additional base attack damage to delete people as well. Now 2 defensive alternatives are a Frozen Heart or Banshee's Veil if you feel that you don't need either the armor or magic resist respectively. And a Titanic Hydra is a great pickup as well if you were looking just for some increased health and damage. So that pretty much covers Hecarim. Like I covered in the very beginning of this guide, he did receive a bunch of nerfs in 5.24. However, he is still a very, very viable top laner. He counters a ton of champions, and he doesn't really have a ton of counters. So, you know, if you have to pick early in the draft, he's a good choice because, as I said, he does not really get countered that easily. On top of this, he's a very fun and unique champion. He's one of the only champions, really, where you rush movement speed very early on, due to obviously his passive, which gives attack damage out of it as well. Playing a traditional top laner can get boring sometimes, as you're just kind of bashing the enemy champion and not really doing much damage. But as Hecarim, you're looking for roaming opportunities and teleport ganks as you move insanely fast. I'd like to thank you guys for watching this guide. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. If you were tuning into this guide to see if Hecarim was, still a viable champion because of all the nerfs, he definitely is. So he is still very good to learn. He is also very fun. He is a great champion all around. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. I have many more guides to come out in the near future, so please look out for those. As always, if you have any champions you'd like to see a guide on, please leave those in the comments. I'll make sure to do those. I do have a bunch to do in order right now, but I will add those to the end, and they will be made shortly. Thanks again for watching.